Hey, and welcome to the highlights of episode number 61 with Daniel DeBaun. Some of my favorite and most fascinating parts of this episode were when Daniel talks about the harmful effects EMFs from our phones and laptops are having on us and how this is affecting us and suppressing our immune system. I also love all the practical tips and tricks that he gives us that we can start to use today to protect ourselves even more. But there is so much more life-changing information that you get in the full episode. So, to listen to the full podcast and to get all the info in the show notes, head to melissaambrosini.com/61 right now. Dan, I am so excited to have you on the show because I love your company, DefenderShield. My husband and I both have your shields for our laptops and our phones, and we have the air tubes. So first of all, thank you for creating them. But how did it all start?
It turns out about 5 years ago or so, we were sitting around during the holidays and my sons were using their laptops on their lap, literally for hours at a time. And my wife, who doesn't have a science background, said, this can't be good. I want grandchildren. So she had an intuition that there could be danger from the RF and the emissions coming from a laptop. So I thought about it a little bit, and I realized I have a science background. I did technology stuff for years and years and years, and I realized I know exactly what's going on. And yes, there may be some dangers. So I looked into it a little bit, and sure enough, there was scientific evidence that suggested when you have a transmissions close to the groin area, both male and female, it's dangerous to the body. And so I said, well, let's try to figure out what we could do to help fix this problem. So believe it or not, I invented a technology that we incorporated into our products, and we built a product for my sons for their use. Well, their friends liked it and they wanted a product like that. So we made some for them. And all of a sudden, where we started was to try to fix a problem that we had with our sons, and it became an opportunity to share our knowledge and expertise with many. And that's how we started.
So what are the real effects? Like by having our laptops on our lap, like what is it actually doing to us? And having our phone up to our head, what are the real effects? Like what is going on?
When you use a tablet or a laptop on your lap, after 3 to 4 hours, for a male, there can be as much as 25% of the sperm that's immobile.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a near-term impact. And in fact, there is evidence that there's a more long-term impact. So if you're looking to have babies, you may want to be careful about putting those things close to your groin. Now, for females, it turns out that there is potential for tumors after 3 to 4 hours of exposure, close exposure. And a very small portion of them become cancerous. You asked me about cell phones, and I have a great article that was actually published recently out of the University of Queensland in Australia. Their information technology and engineering organization evaluated what happens to a cell phone that's directly touching the head. A little bit of background: when the standards were set for that, for those technologies, they assumed a 6-foot male would be using the phone occasionally, and they wanted to ensure that the penetration of that signal wouldn't be more than 25 millimeters into the head, and that it wouldn't heat up more than 2 degrees. Why do I say 2 degrees? Well, you know what a microwave oven is, right? And when you put a piece of meat into a microwave oven, what happens is the water in between the cells heat up, and it cooks your meat. So if you keep it in really long, it cooks it really from medium rare to well done. Well, that's a microwave oven is the same frequency as a cell phone. So you're literally putting, when you put to your head, a microwave signal, but the strength of it is much less than your microwave. But nevertheless, there's a thermal impact.
So we'll look back in about 5, 10, or 15 years from now and think, what the heck were we doing? What do you predict are the long-term side effects of the EMFs from the phones and computers?
It turns out that we know that the frontal lobe cancer of the brain has increased and compounded every year for the past 10 years by 2%. So we already know that the impacts to the are clear and evident through the scientific work that's been going on over the last 10 years. There's a researcher in Sweden. His name is Dr. Ali Johansson. What his research has found is that we're not just feeling it, like our fingers are not feeling the pins and needles. Our head is not just getting a headache, but it's also suppressing our immune system.
Oh.
So he recently put a research story. And by the way, that makes so much sense, because why is it getting worse and worse for people who are exposed to these emissions? It's because their immune systems are being suppressed. Do you know that 20% of the population is electromagnetic hypersensitive? What that means is, like, you take a cell phone, you put it to your head, and your head hurts. You get a headache. If you pick up your phone, your fingers tingle. There are a lot of implications, and it gets worse as you get older. Of that 20%, which is growing, by the way, 80% are female. So we already know that there is a growing population that really feels it, and it really hurts them when they're close to these technologies. And it's only getting worse.
But what if we're using one of your DefenderShield cases?
Oh, we eliminate the signal completely.
Wow.
You don't even need to worry about that, Melissa. If you move it 300 millimeters away, 12 inches in the US, 80% of the danger is gone just by that 300 millimeter. By 900 millimeter, it's like, it's not a problem at all. So the distance you have from technology. So if you have a router and you're working at a desk and the router is right next to you, 300 millimeters away, move it, put it 1,000 millimeters away, and it will never bother you, and ever bother you. If you use a cell phone and you use it for 5 minutes and then you put it 4 or 5 feet away from you, there's nothing that's going to happen to those cells in your body, because the duration of the signal is very short. So it doesn't have a lot of time to influence the cells of the body.
And what about turning your Wi-Fi off at night?
Oh, yes. What I do is I have a timer on my Wi-Fi. And at night, it turns off at 10 o'clock at night, and 7 o'clock in the morning, it turns back on. So I know I do not have any RF signals floating around in my home when I'm sleeping. And that's a very simple thing to do, and it really does impact it.
What are your thoughts on airplane mode? Does that still, like, what percentage does that limit our exposure?
Remember, we spoke about duration. You're eliminating 80% of exposures completely when you do that. That's very, very smart to do. Here are other tips too. When you use a cell phone, there's actually not just the cell tower connection you're worried about, but they allow these smartphones to connect to your Wi-Fi. And by the way, when you're in your car and you connect to the magic within the car, and you can use it to work with your systems within the car, they're using Bluetooth. So there's not just one signal coming out of a smartphone, there are 3. So you want to make sure that the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi are turned off. If you don't need them, you shouldn't have them on.
Now, I've read a lot that iPhones are worse than Androids, and I have an iPhone, something to do with the specific absorption rate. Can you explain that? Is that true?
Yes. Every manufacturer has to verify that they're compliant with standards. And that's called this specific absorption rate, the SAR, as you just mentioned. And some manufacturers go to the greatest strength as they can, like Apple products. They're 1.6 watts per kilogram, which is the maximum they can be allowed based on standards throughout the world. Androids and others, they can be as low as 1.4 gigahertz, watts per kilogram. And so you're right. The choice of the manufacturer and the SAR rate, you can look at and find which ones are best and worst. And that stuff is on the internet. You can find that, and you can typically compare and look for the ones that have the least to the most.